Thank you. The next item of business is First Minister's questions. At question number 1, I call Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This week we discovered the Calmac Ferry MV Glenrosa won't be completed until June 2026, and that's at the earliest. It will enter service at least 8 years late. So why will it take so long?
First Minister.
So, first of all, I want to make clear that the time that it's taken to build the Glenrosa is unacceptable. The Deputy First Minister set out to Parliament yesterday many of the reasons why that's the case. This has obviously caused disruption to island communities, and the Scottish Government is very focused on making sure, with the measures the Deputy First Minister outlined yesterday, that early progress is made on the Glenrosa and that it can join the Glen Sannox in service at the earliest possible opportunity.
Russell Finlay.
Thank you. We asked John Swinney's predecessor how high the eventual bill for the Glenrosa and Glen Sannox was likely to reach. 3 years ago, we specifically asked Nicola Sturgeon if the costs would exceed £400 million. And she said, "I simply don't recognise those numbers." Well, Scotland's taxpayers certainly do recognise those numbers, because they're the ones paying the bill for the SNP's mess. Reporting this week, the BBC said the ferries will now cost £460 million and counting. So does John Swinney at least recognise those numbers? And what will the final cost be to taxpayers?
First Minister.
Well, the total forecasted cost to complete the vessel has increased from £150 million to £172.5 million, with an additional risk contingency of £12.5 million. So I can't be definitive to Mr Finlay about that point, because of obviously the risk contingency depends on the sequence of events that take place in the completion of the vessel. But I make clear to Parliament that it is unacceptable that these vessels have cost so much, that the delays have been experienced, but the Government is very focused on making sure that these vessels enter service so that we can deliver on our commitments to sustainable ferry services to island communities.
Russell Finlay.
Well, I think that's a deeply concerning answer from the First Minister. He's clearly not willing, or indeed perhaps able, to say how much this is going to end up costing taxpayers, or when these boats will both be in service. And it was John Swinney who personally signed off what was a corrupt Calmac procurement process. He has never accepted blame. Nobody in the SNP ever has or ever does. Not a single one of them has held their hands up to islanders or taxpayers. £500 million wasted, nearly a decade wasted. So who is responsible?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I unreservedly accept my responsibility for everything that happens in the name of my government. That's why I'm the First Minister of Scotland, and I always accept my responsibilities in the exercise of government responsibilities. Now, Russell Finlay mentioned the engagement with island communities. I engage regularly with island communities on ferry services issues. My Transport Secretary was recently in South Uist engaging with island communities and delivering practical solutions to island communities affected by the ferry disruption. So that is what the Government is going to focus on. We will accept our responsibilities and we will deliver on our commitments to island communities, which is what the Government is doing.
Russell Finlay.
The First Minister says he's responsible. He's clearly responsible in word only and not in deeds. No SNP minister has been held to account. And the last thing these islanders need is more visits from SNP politicians. They want to see ferries. A £500 million blunder, but no SNP minister has ever been sacked. The ferry saga symbolises so much that's wrong under the SNP. John Swinney and Nicola Sturgeon shamelessly exploited Fergus Marine and its workers for party political purposes. During election campaigns, they loved posing for the cameras at the nationalised yard. The truth is they preferred PR grandstanding instead of providing a decent ferry service for islanders. And who can forget when Sturgeon launched a ferry with painted-on windows? John Swinney has sunk £500 million, money that could have been spent raising school standards, fixing the roads or creating more GP appointments. How much better off would people be if that money had gone into our public services instead of going down the drain?
Let's always use first and surnames. First Minister.
Let's look, President Officer, at the commitment of the Government to ferry services. So when the Government came to office in 2007, the budget for ferry services was £90 million. In the current financial year, it's now 5 times that budget.
Let's hear the First Minister.
That, Presiding Officer, is to operate. That, Presiding Officer, is to operate the services to our communities, which are now more extensive than when we came to office. Now, we've delivered the Glen Sannox into service. We've purchased the additional vessel of the Loch Freesa. We've chartered the MV Alfred and the MV Arrow to provide additional resilience. We've commissioned 2 new vessels for Isla, 2 new vessels for the Little Minch routes, and we've commissioned 7 new vessels for some of the smaller routes that are taken forward. We've progressed investment in key ports and harbours, and we are confirming revenue funding and strategic support to the island ferry services in Scotland. So this Government will keep true to its commitments.
Let us hear the First Minister.
This Government will keep true to island communities its commitments, which is principally delivered through the fact that ferry travel to our island communities is significantly cheaper than the ferry services would have been.
Members, let us hear the First Minister.
Had the Government not introduced road equivalent tariff into our ferry services. So we've made ferry services more affordable for people in our island communities. We're investing. First Minister.
I know that there are many members in this chamber who wish an opportunity to put questions today. We will be able to undertake our business more effectively if members can hear one another. First Minister.
So, Presiding Officer, the Government has invested in road equivalent tariff. We've reduced ferry fares for our island communities. We're providing specific support to island communities that have been affected by disruption, and we're investing in a new vessel fleet. That is this Government delivering on its commitments to support our island communities in Scotland.
Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Island communities need ferries, Presiding Officer. I think you're missing that very point. The MV Glen Rosa ferry, first due over half a decade ago, has been delayed by another 9 months, with costs rising by up to £35 million. Combined with the Glen Sannox, which was launched almost 7 years late, the cost of the 2 ships is now over £460 million. That's nearly 5 times the original contract price. And the fact that the new vessels don't fit at the preferred port of Ardrossan makes the matter even worse. This in the same week that it was revealed that cancellations due to repairs on the ageing Calmac fleet have risen by a staggering 531%. So much for steadying the ship. Why is John Swinney unable to get a grip of this crisis?
First Minister.
As a consequence of decisions that I have taken, and which I'm very happy to be accountable for, we have investment in 2 new vessels, the Glen Rosa and the Glen Sannox. We have 2 additional vessels coming on the Isla route, 2 new vessels coming on the Little Minch route, and we have 7 small vessels coming. And in relation to Calmac sailings, on the last full year of statistics, show that there were 170,215 scheduled sailings on the Calmac network. Only 3.4% were cancelled due to technical or other reasons, and the overwhelming majority of cancellations on the route were understandably because of weather-related issues. So I simply say to Mr Sarwar, I am acutely conscious of the challenges on the island ferry network, but the network despite these issues, performs very strongly for island communities, and the Government's investment will help to build that resilience in the years to come.
Anna Sarwar.
The First Minister is basically saying that the island community should be angry with the weather rather than with the Scottish Government. They're angry with the Scottish Government because you have failed them. The SNP's ferry fiasco is damaging lives and livelihoods on the Isle of Arran. For islanders, it means round trips of at least 3 hours for hospital appointments. 3 hours for hospital appointments. It means school trips cancelled for kids at a moment's notice, and it means utter chaos for businesses. Let me give them a few examples. Linda Johnson, the co-founder of Auchrani Resort, told me that businesses are being pushed to breaking point. Bill Calderwood of the Isle of Arran Ferry Committee said the community are at a loss at what more can be said about the continued examples of mismanagement on this project. Sheila Gilmore, Chief Executive of Visit Arran, said, "We are going through an economic and social crisis. Arran is an amazing island with so much to offer if only more people could get there." So why are John Swinney and the SNP repeatedly failing our island communities?
First Minister.
Well, I understand the pressures that exist in Arran and I've met many of the businesses and organisations that Mr Sarwar mentions, but I would point out a number of things in response. First of all, the principal vessel that's responsible for servicing the Arran network, the MV Caledonian Isles, has been required extensive repair, and it's expected to re-enter service on the 9th of June and will be able to operate from the port of Ardrossan, which is its main and home port. In the interim, there have been 2 vessels which have been providing sustainable services from Troon, I accept, different locations from Ardrossan, the MV Glensanox and the MV Alfred, which have been delivering, from the information available to me, appropriate and adequate capacity for the Arran routes at all times. And the CALMAC have taken judgments to make sure that route could be sustainable. And in relation to Ardrossan, the Cabinet Secretary for Transport has made clear that the Government is engaged in active discussions about acquiring the Ardrossan port in order for us to be able to undertake the improvements and the strengthening of that port which are necessary and which have not taken place to date because it is in private ownership. So the Government is delivering a sustained ferry service to the island of Arran, which is providing adequate capacity, and the Government will continue its investment programme, which of course will be strengthened by the arrival of the Glen Rosa and the other steps I mentioned in relation to Ardrossan.
Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, the fact is the SNP is addicted to wasting people's money. We have a prison that was supposed to cost £100 million, now costing £1 billion and rising. Millions and millions of pounds of public money wasted on legal fees to defend the incompetence of this SNP government, and we are rapidly approaching £500 million of public money on 2 delayed ferries. And today I can reveal over £500 million has been spent fixing the ageing ferry fleet, while over-budget vessels lay unfinished. This is now a £1 billion SNP ferry fiasco, made by the SNP, paid for by working Scots. And isn't it the case that John Swinney and the SNP can't be trusted with the public's money?
First Minister.
Well, the Government has, of course, applied the consistent stewardship to the public finances, which has resulted in us balancing the Government, delivering balanced budgets for every year of this Government's term in office, despite the enormous pressures that exist within the public finances. Mr Sarwar talked about the construction costs on prisons. I wonder if Mr Sarwar has looked at any of the data about the impact of the energy price increases after the invasion of Ukraine on capital costs. It's affecting every single capital project in the whole of the United Kingdom as a consequence of those factors, not to mention the fact that the Barlinnie project that he cites is a larger and more extensive project than was originally conceived of. Now, in relation to ferry services, as I indicated to Russell Finlay, this Government has put investment into the ferry network to do two things: to make sure that we can acquire new capacity for in vessels for the years to come, and those vessels will be delivered onto the network, but also to make it more affordable for people in island communities to be able to utilise the ferry services. So what I would say to Mr Sarwar is that this government at all times will invest in our ferry network, we will invest in our island communities, and we will apply the stringent controls to public finances that I've seen this government re-elected on several times before, and we intend to do it again in 2026.
Question number 3, Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, there is a crisis in social care in Scotland, and research by my colleague Angus MacDonald MP shows that in the last decade, the number of care homes for older people in the Highlands fell by a fifth, and that's whilst the older population in that part of the country is surging. Duncan lived in Acharacal in the West Highlands, but when he needed a care home, the nearest available was in Fort Augustus because the local home to him had closed. That's the equivalent of placing an Edinburgh resident at a care home in Dumfries. The travel time meant that his wife Nino was robbed of precious hours with her dying husband every single day, time she can never get back. Does the First Minister think that that is acceptable?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I think it's essential that we have effective social care services in all of our communities, no matter their geography in Scotland. So the experiences that are cited by Alex Cole-Hamilton about the couple in Acharacal is concerning, and of course I want people to have access to local care services. We work closely in the joint work between the Health Service and local authorities to support the delivery of care in all of our communities, and that's the subject of the very focused work to make sure that care home provision and social care services are available in all communities around the country.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Well, it's not just people like Nino that are being denied that precious time with their loved ones, because on any given night in this country, 2,000 Scots are stuck in hospital. They are well enough to leave, but cannot. Why? Because there is no care home place to receive them or a care package to help them home. That means hospitals are overwhelmed. That means people aren't getting operations. That means ambulances are stacking up outside our A&E. So, can I ask the First Minister if he will commit with urgency to building new care homes in areas like the West Highlands, to delivering key worker housing and to boosting salaries to make social care a profession of choice?
First Minister.
There's actually a lot of what Alex Cole-Hamilton says I agree with, because there is a link between hospital capacity, social care capacity, ambulance demand, all of which is interlinked. It's a whole system approach, and that's how the government approaches it. That's how the Health Secretary and I take these issues forward in our dialogue with the Health Service. Delayed discharge is, of course, falling. It's come down from its peak by just short of 200 places. It's still far too high, but it is coming down. That's because of the investment the government's budget, which Mr Cole-Hamilton supported, is putting into health and social care at local community level. We have, of course, intervened as a government to support the acquisition by the public sector of care homes, one in Fort William and one also in Mallaig. There is, of course, another dimension to this, which I think Mr Cole-Hamilton and I might be agreed upon, and that is about the attitude that's prevailing about care staff in our country. Because on Monday, the message from the Prime Minister was catastrophic for the care sector in Scotland. Catastrophic. I've never heard anything so damaging for the delivery of care in our communities. And Mr Cole-Hamilton is absolutely entitled to put these questions to me, but the implications of the irresponsible statements by the Prime Minister on Monday will have a huge effect on the delivery of social care. And if Parliament wants to dismiss what I'm saying, they should take seriously what Dr Donald McCaskill, of the Chief Executive of Scottish Care, is suggesting, because our ability to deliver social care in this country has been directly damaged by the actions and the language and the rhetoric of the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and that's a disgrace.
Question number 4, Colette Stevenson.
To ask the First Minister regarding any implications for its work to tackle poverty, what assessment the Scottish Government has made of the Department for Work and Pensions forecasts reportedly indicating that the UK Government's planned reductions to disability benefits will impact 700,000 families that are already in poverty.
First Minister.
President Officer, I remain deeply concerned about the effects of these reforms on people across Scotland, particularly those with disabilities and long-term conditions. The UK Government's own analysis shows that these reforms will push a further 250,000 people, including 50,000 children, into relative poverty by the end of the decade. We'll see 3.2 million families losing out from changes to the universal credit health element. This Government is taking concrete action to support disabled people in Scotland. For example, we provided support to 430,000 people through our adult disability payments since January, and with the rollout nationally of pension age disability payments, we are now providing support to disabled people of all ages.
Colette Stevenson.
I thank the First Minister for that response. Scottish Labour have been shamefully silent on the UK Government's cuts to disability benefits, despite their damaging impact. That's on top of them failing to oppose Labour cuts to winter fuel payments, maintaining Westminster cruel two-child cap, and failing to back fair compensation for WASPy women. So while Scottish Labour sit on their hands and watch the Labour UK Government push more people into poverty, can the First Minister advise what steps this SNP Scottish Government is taking to support households affected by the worst of Westminster austerity?
First Minister.
President, the Scottish Government has, of course, intervened on a number of these questions with the steps, first of all, to restore the winter fuel payments to pensioners in Scotland. The Scottish Government has made provision for that in its budget, which takes direct account of the cuts that were made as one of the first acts of the new incoming Labour Government. There are, of course, the investments that we make in the Scottish Child Payment, which are keeping thousands of children out of poverty in Scotland. And the budget included provision also for steps to remove the two-child cap, which I would have expected a Labour Government to have removed, but they have not done so. So I assure my colleague Colette Stevenson that the Scottish Government will do all that we can to eradicate poverty, but our challenge is being made all the greater by the actions of a United Kingdom Labour Government.
Jeremy Balfour.
Presiding Officer, the first principle of adult disability payment is to help people get and stay in employment. It was never intended to be an income replacement benefit. Does the First Minister agree with me that reductions to this benefit as proposed, where people will require help to wash, dress and prepare meals, may longer qualify, is risking the ability to maintain employment and goes against the fundamental principle of this benefit?
First Minister.
I do agree with Mr Balfour on that point, because the structure of that payment is designed to support people to be able to make as much of a contribution to wider society, particularly in relation to employment, as they can. But the very practical and legitimate issues that Mr Balfour raises will impede individuals from doing that if they are enacted. So it's very damaging, it's short-sighted, it will actually undermine economic contribution in the long term, which is the folly of it, one of the many aspects of folly of it. So I am very happy to endorse the points that Mr Balfour makes.
Question number 5, Sandesh Gilhani.
To ask the First Minister what steps the Scottish Government is taking to address the performance of NHS 24 in light of report that nearly 1 in 5 calls to the service went unanswered last year.
First Minister.
President Officer, NHS 24 continually strive to improve their call handling times. However, I apologise to anyone who has experienced an extended wait. Calls to NHS 24 can be recorded as unanswered for a variety of reasons, not always related to waiting times. Callers are offered a variety of options, including signposting to NHS Inform for self-care advice or to other services which may be more clinically appropriate to meet their needs. NHS 24's workforce has increased by almost 50% since 2014, with a record number of call handlers and clinical advisors in place, and we've increased NHS 24's budget to a record £118.3 million this year.
Sandesh Gulhani.
Declaration of interest as a practising NHS GP. First Minister, I have worked in out of hours. The staff are working flat out and the patients I saw were distressed and desperate for help. But last year, over 300,000 calls to NHS 24 were abandoned, with one person left waiting for more than 4 hours just to get through. These aren't just stats. They're real people, left without urgent health advice when they need it most. No manager has been held accountable for this debacle, and yet the Scottish Government is spending £118.3 million on NHS 24 this year. First Minister, stop talking about money and start talking about outcomes. For that kind of money, the public deserve much better. So will the First Minister guarantee that next year we will see significant improvements for desperate patients?
Always through the Chair. First Minister.
I would repeat one of the points I made earlier on, which is that calls can be abandoned for a variety of reasons, not always related to waiting times, because there are on the menu of messages that members of the public will hear a variety of signposting options which will encourage members of the public to seek advice, particularly when the service is under pressure. And Dr Gulhani will be familiar with all of these from his professional background. So, and often, and again from Dr Gulhani's background, he will know that not all callers will need to get through to NHS 24. They may be able to get the advice through NHS Inform that addresses their concerns. Now, having spent time personally, as the Health Secretary has, with NHS call handlers and heard the professional advice, I would say two things. First of all, I commend the quality and the strength of the advice that is available at a very high clinical level on the telephone service. And secondly, the signposting for face-to-face engagements for members of the public is undertaken, in my opinion, very effectively. Now, I am concerned about the data that Dr Gulhani refers to, because I cannot quite fathom how a call can wait for 4 hours to be answered. So I'm going to interrogate this data further, because I think that the extremities of this cause me concern, and I'm going to look further at the issues that Dr Gulhani raises on the very long waits. But on the whole, I think NHS 24 serves us well, although I accept that people will sometimes, under periods of high demand, will have to wait for longer than they might ordinarily like to wait.
Jackie Dunbar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the First Minister outline how the Scottish Government is working to implement recommendations which were set out in its report into the redesign of urgent care published in January, specifically targeting the levels of staffing currently in place at NHS 24?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, one of the key points here, and it relates also to Dr Gulhani's question, is the question of capacity. So the Government has over time been expanding capacity in NHS 24. As a consequence of the redesign of urgent care, we invested an additional £4 million to allow NHS 24 to recruit additional staff to reduce call waiting times, and that investment will also ensure that awareness is raised amongst the public on when to contact 111, as well as ways to access other services.
Jackie Bailey.
The First Minister will know that when NHS 24 triage your call, you can be phoned back by a nurse or a doctor, often more than once. You're then triaged again by the Health Board, and it can take hours before you're actually seen. In the case of Thomas Roger, aged 27 from Falkirk, he phoned NHS 24 several times before actually dying in hospital because he was struggling to breathe. Will the First Minister publish data on the time from the initial call to the actual treatment?
First Minister.
I'll explore that point, but I think it might be difficult to give the complete picture other than in an individual case. And I can understand in the case that Jackie Bailey puts to me that would be possible, undoubtedly. I think also, and I stress I'm not a clinician, but listening to the example that Jackie Bailey cites to me, that sounds to me like a call that should have been put through to the Scottish Ambulance Service. If an individual has difficulty breathing, I think that raises some pretty acute issues. But I simply pass that observation. I'm very sorry to hear the circumstances that Jackie Bailey puts to me. So I think on individual cases we could look at that, and there would be merit in doing that to explore the journey that individuals have to go through, because there may be too many. We have all gone through experiences of having to tell the story a few times. So if that can be made smoother, absolutely. But I think at a systemic level, I think it would be difficult to collect the data that Jackie Baillie, or assemble the data that Jackie Baillie is looking for. But on individual cases, I think it's possible to do so.
Question number 6, Michelle Thompson.
To ask the First Minister what assessment the Scottish Government has made of the recently announced UK-USA trade deal and its potential implications for businesses in Scotland.
First Minister.
President, so the Scottish Government will consider the full details and all of its implications to Scotland when those details are clear. We understand that only general terms have been agreed, with much detail requiring further negotiation.
Michelle Thompson.
I thank the First Minister for that response. Now, I wonder whether he agrees a so-called deal that fails to engage with the Scottish Government, that fails to take account of Scotland's salmon and whisky industry, that fails to protect our beef sector and lands us with 10% tariffs across the board, is accurately described by the Nobel laureate Professor Joe Stiglitz as not worth the paper it's written on.
First Minister.
I think the issues that Michelle Thompson raises are absolutely material to the consideration of the UK-USA trade deal. It is a source of enormous disappointment and frustration to the Scottish Government that we were not given the type of engagement that in the formulation of the trade deal, because of the effect it will have on Scottish business prior to its agreement by the United Kingdom Government. Indeed, I found the process deeply personally unsatisfactory, and the Deputy First Minister has communicated that to the UK Government. And that view is not just held by me, it's held by my counterparts in Wales and Northern Ireland as well. So I think there's a lot to be done yet on this trade deal to make sure that key industries such as salmon and whisky are protected. But the Scottish Government, as Michelle Thompson will know, has taken steps to intervene to support the Scottish company base, with the explanation in the programme for government last week of further support to exporters, which the government will follow through.
Tim Eagle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm not surprised by the question, because as I understand it, the SNP have never supported a single trade deal in the UK Parliament, whether negotiated by the UK Government or by Brussels. Now, trade deals, I think, offer great opportunity, but it is surely important that we do protect UK food, welfare and environmental standards. Now, NFUS are right in saying that the deal raises a number of important questions for Scotland's farmers. Now, unlike the SNP's flawed domestic agricultural policy, is the First Minister able to give any reassurances on the work his government is doing to protect Scotland's vital agricultural industry as the talks progress?
First Minister.
Well, we work very closely with the National Farmers Union and the agriculture sector, and as the member of the Scottish Parliament for Perthshire North, which involves extensive agricultural interests, I spend a lot of my time engaging with the agricultural industry. So let me assure Mr Eagle, if he's worried about that the government is very much engaged on these questions. Now, when it comes to the protection and the promotion of the agricultural sector, I think I would venture to suggest that the farming sector feels better supported in Scotland than it is in the rest of the United Kingdom, and that it has an approach from this government which is more sympathetic to its needs and its interests, and that will of course be the case during my leadership of the Scottish Government. So, and obviously the issues that Mr Eagle raises about the trade deal are vital and material in relation to the farming industry, and we'll do all that we can to address those issues with the UK Government. And lastly, on Mr Eagle's point about trade engagement, one of the trade arrangements that I'm very supportive of, always been very supportive of, very keen for us to have more of, is a good trading relationship with the European Union. And that was shattered by the stupidity of Brexit. And the actions of the Conservative Government, and I want to get us back into those arrangements as quick as I possibly can do.
We move to constituency and general supplementaries, and I call Emma Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's welcome that the Scottish Government's Nature Restoration Fund has now invested over £65 million in hundreds of projects which are helping Scotland's species, woodlands, rivers and seas back on the road to recovery. Can the First Minister advise how the extension of this fund, announced in his programme for government, will build on this work and help to tackle the nature crisis?
Minister.
President Officer, we've got about 250 projects that are benefiting from the Nature Restoration Fund so far. We're extending that, and the extension will provide essential investment for the steps we're taking to halt biodiversity loss in Scotland's species, woodlands, rivers and seas, and to encourage them back on the road to recovery.
Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Yesterday we learned that the principal of Perth College UHI had stepped down with immediate effect. This follows on from concerns about management decisions taken at the college, the collapse of the long-established subsidiary company Air Service Training Limited, and funding challenges caused by SNP budget choices, leaving the college with a £2 million deficit. So what action will the Scottish Government now take to provide assurance both to staff and to students that their futures are secure?
First Minister.
First of all, I'd like to thank Dr Margaret Cook for her service as Principal of Perth College and to wish her well for the future. Perth College is, of course, a self-governing and autonomous institution which is part of the University of the Highlands and Islands. It is responsible for its own decisions within the funding envelopes that the Scottish Government provides. The Government is, of course, supporting substantially the college sector within Scotland. These decisions for distribution of funds are made on the Government's behalf by the Scottish Funding Council in accordance with legislation. So the Government is strongly supportive of the college sector, and I look forward to the leadership of Perth College taking forward the strengthened measures that are required to ensure the future of the institution that plays a significant part in the education of my constituents and has a formidable footprint in the local economy in Perthshire.
Claire Baker.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. My constituent, Ryan Thomas Quinn, is in the Parliament today. His friend Aaron Murphy died tragically young, and Ryan is raising awareness of the considerable financial cost for families affected by childhood cancer diagnosis, with many who are forced to borrow money to cope. I do recognise that under special rules for terminal illness, fast-track access to disability payments is in place, and I do welcome the guidance for doctors and nurses in ensuring access to these benefits. Can I ask the First Minister if something similar can be offered to those affected by childhood cancer, and how can we ensure that families are able to quickly access all routes of funding and support following a childhood cancer diagnosis?
First Minister.
I'm very sympathetic to the point that Claire Baker makes, and I welcome Ryan to Parliament today. I know that the Health Secretary and the Social Justice Secretary are meeting this afternoon, no doubt arranged through Claire Baker, so I welcome that engagement, and I do commit to the Government engaging on this question. I think the point that Claire Baker makes is a reasonable one of supporting families with children who are affected by a cancer diagnosis, which is a tragic experience and a traumatising experience to have. And I commit my ministers to address this issue. While I'm on my feet, I might just say that several years ago, Perth High School, in my own which educates children in my constituency, lost a child to teenage cancer. And the young people, about 400 of them, a couple of weeks ago, ran in the Perth Park Run to raise money for the Teenage Cancer Trust. They do that every year in memory of the young person they lost. I think it's an indication of the absolute solidarity of young people on this tragic issue, and I compliment them on their activities in that respect.
Emma Roddick.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome yesterday's announcement at the All Energy Conference that Orkney will be the site of the UK's largest wave energy project, demonstrating Scotland's massive potential in wave and tidal stream generation. Will the First Minister provide more details on this initiative, and does he agree with me that we must continue to build momentum to ensure that Scotland can become a world leader in renewables?
First Minister.
President, I'm delighted to welcome the news that Emma Roddick has commented upon. Power Ocean will be siting its 5-megawatt array at the EMEX at the European Marine Energy Centre in Orkney. The project is scheduled to deploy in 2029 and will see components manufactured locally, creating skilled jobs and supporting the local supply chain. I think this is another indication of the willingness and the outlook of our communities to embrace renewables. I think it's a huge fillip to the magnificent activity that's been going on at EMEC in Orkney for many years. And I think it demonstrates, and the government, I assure Emma Roddick of this point, the government will ensure there is wide awareness of the significance of a project of this nature in strengthening our agenda on renewables, which is a huge strength for Scotland.
Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, plans to build affordable homes for disabled residents in Clackmannan have been delayed while costs are recalculated. The Council previously laid proposals to construct bungalows on a site in the town, and they have now been reduced. Given the urgent requirements for more accessible housing in my region, what assurances can the Scottish Government give that they will do all they can to maximise the availability for this much-needed development to progress? First Minister.
There's two things I would say to Mr Stewart in that respect. First of all, our planning hub is looking at practically at a number of sites that are stalled, that have got some difficulty, that have come in. We all know that there can be issues that can emerge in the system. So our planning hub is looking at these particular developments. If Mr Stewart wants to write to me, I'll make sure the relevant minister takes that forward. Second point I'd make is on the question of construction costs, which I referred to in my answer to Mr Sawar earlier on. One of the problems with a number of these developments is the cost of materials in construction increased substantially during 2021-22. Now, the annual average growth rate in construction costs was 5% in the 4-year period between 2017 and 2020. In 21-22, it was 24%. Nearly 5 times as much. So these are some of the practical cost issues that are being wrestled with. But if Mr Stewart wants to send me details of that, I'll certainly explore what can be done through the planning hub to support his constituents.
Christine Graham.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. As these welcome summer months approach, we enter the season of gala days and common ridings across the borders, Midlothian and throughout rural Scotland indeed. The British Horse Society has launched a campaign aimed at motorists entitled Dead Slow to prevent injuries and even deaths to riders and horses. Will the First Minister encourage particularly city drivers to remind themselves of their obligations under the Highway Code and just how to drive when there are horses on the roads in rural areas? And I declare an interest as convener of the cross-party group on animal welfare.
First Minister.
Horse riders are recognised as vulnerable road users, and we work with partners such as the British Horse Society to improve safety, and there is a vulnerable road user working group which includes the British Horse Society, which met on the 1st of May. Now, we very much support the activities that Christine Graham referred to. The common ridings are a critical part of borders, the identity of the Scottish borders, and gala days around the community are important celebrations of local activity. So we certainly, in our awareness campaigns, will urge all drivers, particularly those unfamiliar with rural roads, to follow the Highway Code and to pass horses at no more than 10 miles per hour and to give at least 2 metres space for horses as they pass.
Patrick Harvey.
This week it was announced by Glasgow Pride, in line with major Pride events in England, that political parties are no longer welcome to participate. This is something that never even happened at the worst days of political homophobia in the 80s and 90s. And it's a direct result of political attacks on the rights of LGBTQ+ people, especially transphobia. Does the First Minister acknowledge that the political landscape as a whole has betrayed the trust of our community? Does he understand there are Scottish Government employees currently living in fear that their workplaces will be subject to segregation policies, as has already happened in Parliament? And what does the First Minister intend to do to begin restoring the trust that has been lost?
First Minister.
I recognise and sympathise with the point that Mr Harvey has made, because, as I've said consistently since the Supreme Court judgment, I am concerned by how individuals, particularly individuals in the trans community, will be feeling as a consequence of the climate that we are in. And I think all of us, I'm very struck by the fact that the climate of discourse on this issue is absolutely unacceptable. So let me, from this podium, make it clear that my government, as I made clear in the programme for government announcements, absolutely resolute in our support for the LGBTQI+ community, that we will take actions that will be aimed at protecting the rights of all, because the rights of all must be protected in our society, and that's the solemn commitment that I give to the community and that I give to Parliament today.
And Michael Mara.
This morning, Healthcare Improvement Scotland published the report of its unannounced inspection of maternity services at Ninewells Hospital in Dundee. And that report contains shocking details, including delays of induction of labour of up to 3 days, vital equipment such as fetal heartbeat monitors being damaged and not replaced, the number of experienced midwives falling rapidly. And despite hard-working staff providing, as they quote, compassionate and responsive care, the state of the service was so bad in January the HIS made a second visit in February and said they were not assured that sufficient progress or improvement had been made. This situation, First Minister, is hugely worrying for families, especially expectant mothers across Dundee and Angus. What will his government do to ensure the necessary improvements to maternity services actually happen?
First Minister.
The first thing I would say is that it is important that inspections of this type take place so that we can challenge unacceptable practice. And therefore I'm grateful to Healthcare Improvement Scotland for the thoroughness of the work they've undertaken. Secondly, and I understand the legitimate points that Mr Mara puts to me, there are also strengths identified in the service as well, which Mr Mara acknowledges in his question. And that should be recognised, but it shouldn't be an excuse for not addressing unacceptable practice. And the third point is that it's essential that the NHS Tayside leadership takes forward these issues with urgency, and that issue will be communicated firmly to them, and probably has already been communicated firmly by the Health Secretary.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. The next item of business is a members' business debate. Point of order, Jeremy Balfour.
My apologies, Presiding Officer. I should have said when I was asking my question, but I am in receipt of ADP. I apologise for not declaring that.
Thank you, Mr Balfour. That's on the record. There will be now a short suspension to allow those leaving the public gallery and the chamber to do so before the next item of business begins. Thank you.